Hello everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm really excited because today's lesson was pulled deep from the Montmartre vault. Although we did it a while ago, we think the time is right for it now. In this lesson, we'll be showing you how to create a self-portrait in oils, and we'll be using the techniques loosely based on one of the greatest German painters of all time, Albrecht Dürer. But before I get into it, if you're not there now, then come over to montmartre.net, where we've got lots more lessons for your enjoyment. We also have our Facebook attached to that and our Creative Connection. And if you join that, well, we can send you a family project each week, as well as lots of other goodies. So, let's get into it. Hello, and thanks for joining us. So today, I'll be showing you how to paint a self-portrait. So the first thing you will require is a photo of yourself, or of me. If you are to take a photo of yourself, make sure that the light source is on one side, so that is in highlight, and the other side is in deep shadow. It's just more dramatic like that, and easier to see where the shadows lie. Once we have our reference photo, we can go about the job of transferring it onto the canvas. Today, I'll be using the point system. And quite simply, that just means measuring between 2 points, doubling them, and transferring them onto the canvas. So take note of the angle of the head, and it is a slight angle, so we draw a central point. Most of the measurements you can do in your head. Once they're worked out, it's just a simple case of transferring them onto the line on the canvas. We can then start our drawing. I like to draw the outline first and then work on the facial features. Just make sure it is accurate, because one works off these initial lines to gain the position of others and so on. I like to hold the stick loosely and touch the canvas ever so lightly. Again, just take your time. This part of the exercise takes a bit of time and careful observation. As I said, the initial positioning of the lines gives you confidence, so all you have to worry about is the tonal shading. That's why charcoal is so good for this, as you can build up the tones subtly. I like to lightly lay in some very light shadow and blend it in with my finger, and then lay a darker tone in over the top. I find this style of building up tone is a lot less stressful, and you don't get yourself into problems. We can now apply a ground, and we do that to fix the charcoal and to seal that porous canvas, thereby allowing subsequent layers of paint to key on nicely. The ground that we'll be using will be a coloured ground of 4 parts yellow ochre and 1 part burnt umber. And we use a coloured ground to supply a nice mid-tone. So squeeze out your paint, pour in 5 parts of turpentine, and give it a mix. I'm using a Montmartre sponge roller here to apply the ground, as it's easier to lay down a thin coat, and it won't be as inclined to destroy my drawing. I'm just letting this fade out a little bit to create interest. We'll be putting paint over this anyway. Now that's done, let this dry thoroughly. So let's get this paint on. So unscrew the lid and fill up the dipper with the chosen medium. Fill the dipper up about 1/3 of the way. Now I squeeze out my titanium white. I lay out another white because I like to keep one pure, free from contamination. Then I lay out my vermilion, rose madder, yellow ochre, my sienna, burnt umber, raw umber, and the black. Like Dürer, we're going to start with a fairly darkish mid-tone, but we're going to make it translucent by adding our medium. So let's put on a little bit of burnt umber. I'm using the filbert because it can carry a lot of paint, but due to the tip, I can be precise. Mix the burnt umber so it has the viscosity of honey. When you apply the paint, the trick is to lay it on with less medium added where the drawing is darker. Lay it over the lighter areas but add more medium to the paint so it is very translucent. The point to remember with this technique is to keep the coats thin and transparent. Well, that's it for the translucent burnt umber. Now let's lay in some raw umber, and we'll lay this into the shadow areas. Now, one thing I notice a lot of people doing is continually washing their brush. You don't need to. Basically, it's better just to wipe the colour off because that way your brush is still a little bit damp. So add a little medium and get it to the workable stage. When I apply this, I do it in the same way as I did with my burnt umber, but there will be less used and it will only lie in the shadow areas. Although these colours are similar hue, they have very different strength values. To really give it some dimension, I'm going to use black. Lay this tone in very sparingly. It only lies in the areas of deep shadow. So now let's move to the lighter areas. And for these lighter areas, we're going to create a mix from white, vermilion and yellow ochre. Now the trick here is when you're mixing them to mix the darker colours into the lighter tone and build it up slowly. That way you won't destroy your colour. So let's do that. Because the white is the main base colour, spread it out so we can make lots of different tones. For a basic skin tone, mix in a touch of vermilion and a little ochre. Mix them together thoroughly and then add a smidge of rose madder. This is a good mid-tone skin colour that can be altered accordingly. So when I'm happy, I lay it onto the canvas. It's best to apply it sparingly and then spread it out from there. And we must also remember that it is being dropped into a dark wet base, so colour from this base will tint the skin colour a little bit also. For any areas in highlight that are on the darker side, I mix in a little burnt umber, like on the neck here. You will notice that all the while I am making sure I keep my coats thin and transparent. This is important so we get that light from within. Here I add more vermilion and ochre and create a warm tone. I lay it into the areas of reflected light and into the shadow areas. Pick out the highlights and add or subtract from areas to reinforce the illusion of shape. If you make an area too light, just blend it into the existing paint and it will darken. This is actually easier than if you make an area too dark. I now just start to build up tone. And this is just a balancing game. Lay in the colour and constantly keep referring to the photo. Never lay a tone in because you think it might naturally lie there. And keep those coats thin. Blend them into the umber base, always making sure the ground underneath is visible to a degree. Although this is a quick step, it is better to take your time and think about each stroke. I am now mixing up the scale and adding my very light areas. These are not the highlights yet, so into the white I add an ochre and blend the colours to ensure a smooth transition. This is the lovely thing about oil paints. No other medium blends so effortlessly. Now I create a very warm tone and reinforce that reflected light shadow area. While I have this colour on my brush, I lay it into any other areas that look like they need it. Like on the underside of the chin here, I just blend this into the pink skin colour. Again, refer to the photo to see where this light phenomenon occurs. Now we're going to put our highlights in. This has come together really quickly, let me tell you. So the highlights are pure white and they will mix with the existing colours. So let's put some pure titanium white in. This always makes a really big impact on a portrait. And again, it's all about creating that illusion of documenting what the eye actually sees. So sometimes the artist must use a little bit of creative license and exaggerate things a bit to get the point across. For example, no one has pure white patches on their face, but when we paint it like that, it just seems to work. So our facial modelling is pretty much finished to a stage where I think that I can leave it. And all I need to do now is my lips and the eyes. At this stage it looks a little light, but when we add extra colour to it, we can adjust the tone quite effectively and keep subtle highlights in there. The top lip is in shadow, so it will be darker. I add a little white to suggest the edge of the lip and the light that would catch it. And don't forget the shadow cast from it. As my eyes are a dirty green, we can create a convincing colour from yellow ochre and ultramarine. I lay this colour into the appropriate area. I don't lay it on uniformly because eyes aren't that consistently coloured usually. I lay in pure ultramarine around the edges because this occurs on my eyes. I stipple it in with a bit of ochre while I'm at it. If you look at the whites of your eyes, you will notice they are never really white, more of a off-white to pink. So I tint the white with a touch of ochre and vermilion. The left eye is in deep shadow, so it is accordingly dark. So it's best to mix the lightest tone and tint it as you move across each eye. Obviously I'm using the finest round for all this detail work. I lay in a pure black for the pupil and lay in a thin line around the eye. Now I lay in the white highlights on the eye, and these are pure titanium white, and these really give the illusion of sparkling eyes. I also love this part because it signifies the end of this stage. The icing on the cake, if you like. From here, you might like to paint on some hair and a background, and voila! Or you might like to create a little bit of a twist to your artwork. If that sounds like it might be interesting, then keep on watching. But first, let me tell you a little bit of a story. When I was a little boy, I wanted to be a clown, but my mum wasn't very supportive. She told me that it wasn't a real job and I'd never get any respect, so I became a visual artist instead. And with my art skills, I've decided to turn myself into a clown. Jojo the clown. Well, every clown needs a nose, so let's start with that. There is no trick here, just create a round shape and paint it in red. Now we need to make this circle look spherical. And we do this by adding white into the red on this side and darkening the nose on the other side. Darken this with a little phthalo blue. The light's coming from this direction, don't forget. Next we pop on a little highlight, and Bob's your uncle, that's a clown nose. Now I mark up where the face paint will go. I'm using the finest brush from the kit here, and I'm using white and a lot of medium, so it's not too dark. Time now to put on our grease paint. And I'm using the titanium white, but I'm adding a lot of the linseed oil to it. As I said, this white must be very translucent so that the tonal rendering underneath can be seen. I use the small flap from the kit to apply my paint. I'm scratching back the paint with the end of the brush to suggest how the grease paint would look over my ample eyebrows here. The face on the left side is in deep shadow, so I have to darken the white with a touch of black to make a grey, and then apply it onto that side and blend it into the white. Let's paint Jojo's lips now. Use the red for this, just remember to add a touch of medium. I'm using a round brush here. How hilarious is that? Okay, now let's put our black keyline on. I use the fine round for this and again lay some medium onto the black so it flows smoothly. As well as creating the line, pop on some eyebrows above the eye areas. I can lay on Jojo's hair now, and I have decided to make Jojo's hair rainbow colours. I had a wig like this when I was a small boy. I'm painting in the t-shirt a basic white so it doesn't take away from the focal point, the face. Finally, I can lay in my background, and I'm going to use a cobalt blue going from darker to lighter. I squeeze this out in a long line and apply it with my 75mm wide Taklon brush. I cover the negative space around Jojo and then bring the colour into the hair. I then move across the canvas, and as I do, I add white paint to change the tone, blending all the while. As I get to the right side corner, I am painting virtually with oil only, so the ground shows through. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce Fabulous Jojo the Wonder Clown. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, because it was a lot of fun. Don't forget to check out our other lessons and subscribe to our Creative Connection and join our Facebook if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching us, and remember, to keep on painting. See you next time!